The night was young, but the bar was already filled with the kind of energy that promised memorable encounters. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the worn wooden floors, creating pockets of intimacy throughout the space. Smoke hung in lazy swirls near the ceiling, dancing under vintage light fixtures that gave everything a warm, amber glow. The music, a perfect blend of jazz and contemporary beats, was loud enough to create atmosphere, but quiet enough to allow conversation. It was the kind of place where strangers became friends, and sometimes more, where inhibitions loosened with each drink poured. Alex hadn't planned on going out that night. After a grueling week at the design agency where deadlines seemed to multiply faster than they could be met, the original plan had been takeout and mindless streaming until sleep came. But a last-minute text from a friend claiming, "You need human interaction before you forget how to speak," had been persuasive enough. Now, nursing a whiskey neat at the corner of the bar, Alex was silently grateful for the push to venture out. There was something soothing about being alone in a crowd, observing life unfolding around him without the pressure to participate. The bartender, a woman with intricate tattoos cascading down both arms, slid another drink across the polished wood without being asked. "Courtesy of the gentleman at the end of the bar," she said with a knowing smile that suggested this wasn't an unusual occurrence. Alex followed her gaze to where a man sat, partially obscured by other patrons, but clearly watching with interest. Even from a distance, there was something magnetic about him. He wore confidence like a well-tailored suit, relaxed yet unmistakably present. As their eyes met, he raised his glass in a silent toast before returning to what appeared to be a conversation with the bartender. The gesture wasn't presumptuous or demanding, just an acknowledgement, an opening if Alex chose to take it. Curiosity won over caution. Gathering the drink and what remained of his social energy, Alex made his way through the crowd to the end of the bar. Up close, the stranger was even more striking. Dark hair with just enough gray at the temples to suggest experience rather than age, eyes that seemed to hold laughter even in repose, and a mouth that curved easily into a smile as Alex approached. "I'm Jake," he said, extending a hand. His voice had a pleasant roughness to it, like expensive whiskey or the pages of a well-loved book. "I hope you don't mind the drink. You look like you could use a moment of unexpected kindness." "Alex," came the reply, along with a handshake that lingered just a beat longer than necessary. "And I never turn down unexpected kindness. Though I'm curious what made you think I needed it." Jake gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Call it intuition. You have the look of someone who's been carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders all week. I recognize it because I see it in the mirror often enough." He reached into his jacket pocket, producing a small wooden case. "Do you mind if I smoke? It's a ritual that helps me unwind." The case opened to reveal several hand-rolled cigars, the rich scent of tobacco immediately adding to the bar's already complex bouquet of aromas. There was something almost ceremonial about the way Jake selected one, examined it, and prepared it for lighting. His movements were deliberate, practiced, a man who found pleasure in small rituals. "I don't mind," Alex said, finding himself unexpectedly fascinated by the process. "Though I can't say I've ever developed the taste for them myself." Jake's laugh was warm, inviting. "It's an acquired taste, certainly. My grandfather introduced me to them. He used to say that smoking a good cigar forces you to slow down. You can't rush it, can't multitask through it. In a world that demands constant hurry, there's something revolutionary about that." As Jake lit the cigar, the flame briefly illuminated his features, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass and eyes that seemed to hold stories waiting to be told. He took a moment to ensure it was properly lit, then leaned back, exhaling a perfect ring of smoke toward the ceiling. The conversation flowed easily after that, moving from work to travel, from favorite books to embarrassing stories from college days. Jake had a gift for listening, truly listening, with his entire body. He leaned in when Alex spoke, asked questions that showed he was genuinely processing the words, laughed without reservation at the funny parts. It was the kind of attention that made one feel seen, perhaps for the first time in a very long while. "So you're telling me you accidentally sent that email to the entire company?" Jake was saying, amusement dancing in his eyes as Alex recounted a particularly mortifying work mishap. "Every single person, including the CEO who I'd never actually met in person." The subject line was ideas for boosting morale, but the content was just me venting about how soul-crushing the office lighting was. Alex took a long sip of his drink, the memory still capable of producing a flush of embarrassment years later. Jake's laughter was generous, but not mocking. And what happened? The most unexpected thing. The CEO replied, just to me, thankfully, saying he'd always hated the lighting too and asked for my input on the redesign they were planning. Ended up getting a promotion 6 months later. Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to the best opportunities, I guess. I'll drink to that, Jake said, raising his glass. As they clinked glasses, his cigar, which had been resting in an ashtray, chose that precise moment to release a small cascade of gray ash. It floated down like snow, landing squarely on the front of Alex's shirt, a pristine white button-down that now bore a smudge of gray just above the heart. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Jake said, setting down his drink and reaching for a napkin. But then he paused, a mischievous glint appearing in his eyes. "You know, there's an old superstition among cigar smokers. They say if ash falls on someone, it's good luck, but only if removed in a particular way." Before Alex could ask what that meant, Jake leaned forward, closing the small distance between them. With a movement both deliberate and gentle, he pressed his lips to the spot where the ash had fallen, the warmth of his breath seeping through the fabric. It wasn't quite a kiss, more like a whisper against cloth, but the intimacy of the gesture sent electricity racing along Alex's spine. When Jake pulled back, his eyes held a question. The ash was gone, but something far more significant had taken its place, a tension, a possibility, hanging in the air between them like the smoke from Jake's cigar. "I've never heard that superstition," Alex managed to say, voice steadier than expected given the sudden racing of his heart. Jake's smile was slow, knowing. "Perhaps I just made it up. But you have to admit, it's more memorable than using a napkin." The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Around them, the bar continued its Friday night symphony of clinking glasses and overlapping conversations. But in their corner, time seemed to have slowed to a crawl. "You know," Alex said finally, "most people would have just said sorry about your shirt and moved on." "I've never been particularly interested in being most people," Jake replied. "Life's too short for ordinary interactions. Don't you think?" There was something in his directness that was both disarming and thrilling. In a world where so much communication happened through screens and carefully crafted messages, Jake's unfiltered presence felt like stepping into sunlight after too long indoors. "I'm beginning to see the appeal of the extraordinary," Alex admitted. "Though I should warn you, I'm generally much more cautious than this might suggest." Jake nodded, taking another draw from his cigar. "Caution has its place, but so does recognizing when something, or someone, might be worth the risk." He gestured around them. "What if we find somewhere quieter to continue this conversation? No pressure, just a suggestion. There's a small jazz club around the corner that has excellent cocktails and actual comfortable seating." The invitation hung in the air, an inflection point disguised as a simple question. Alex considered it, weighing the safety of routine against the allure of the unknown. The night had already veered so far from the original plan of takeout and television. Why not follow this unexpected path a little further? "Lead the way," Alex said, finishing the last of the drink. "I'm curious about this comfortable seating you speak of. It sounds mythical after an hour on these bar stools." The walk to the jazz club was short but significant, crossing the threshold from a chance encounter into a deliberate choice to spend more time together. The night air was cool against their skin, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the bar. Their shoulders brushed occasionally as they navigated the crowded sidewalk, each contact a small jolt of awareness. Jake pointed out details about the neighborhood as they walked: the hidden courtyard behind an unassuming door, the bakery that made the city's best croissants but was only open 3 days a week, the mural painted by a famous artist before anyone knew their name. It was clear he was someone who noticed things, who found beauty and interest in details others might miss. The jazz club was everything Jake had promised, intimate without being cramped, with low lighting that flattered everyone and music that filled the space without overwhelming conversation. They found a corner booth with deep cushions and a small table just large enough for their drinks. "Much better," Jake said as they settled in. "Now we can actually hear each other without having to lean in quite so close." There was a pause, a hint of that mischief returning to his eyes. "Though I have to admit, the leaning in had its charms. Alex laughed, feeling a lightness that had been absent for longer than he cared to admit. You're very direct, aren't you? Life's too short not to be. We spend so much time dancing around what we really want to say, crafting the perfect text message, wondering if we're being too forward or not forward enough. It's exhausting. Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed unconscious. I decided a while back that honesty, respectful honesty, saves everyone time and heartache. And has that approach worked out well for you? Alex asked, genuinely curious. Jake considered the question, taking a sip of his drink before answering. Mostly. Some people find it off-putting. But the connections I do make tend to be more meaningful. Quality over quantity, I suppose. As the night progressed, their conversation deepened. Jake spoke about growing up in a small coastal town, his decision to leave for college despite family pressure to stay, and the photography career that had taken him around the world before he settled in the city. Alex shared stories about a childhood spent moving from place to place with parents in the diplomatic service, the struggle to find a sense of home, and eventually finding it in design work that could travel anywhere. They discovered shared passions for obscure films, a mutual hatred of cilantro. It tastes like soap and I will die on this hill, Jake declared, and both had once harbored dreams of writing a novel but never found the time to start. With each revelation, the initial attraction deepened into something more textured, more interesting. Can I ask you something personal? Jake said as the band took a break, the sudden relative quiet creating a bubble of privacy around them. Alex nodded, curious. You can ask. I reserve the right to deflect with humor if it's too personal. Fair enough. Jake leaned forward slightly. What are you afraid of? Not spiders or heights. I mean, what keeps you up at night? The question was unexpected, cutting through the pleasant haze of alcohol and attraction to something more fundamental. Alex took a moment before answering, appreciating that Jake didn't rush to fill the silence. Regret, came the answer finally. I'm afraid of looking back and seeing all the moments I didn't seize, the chances I didn't take because I was too cautious or too comfortable or too afraid. I'm afraid of a life half-lived. The admission felt weighty, perhaps too serious for what had been a flirtatious evening, but once started, the truth demanded completion. My father died suddenly when I was in college. He had all these plans for someday, places to visit, experiences to have, but someday never came for him. It changed how I think about time. Jake reached across the table, his hand covering Alex's in a gesture of simple comfort. I'm sorry about your father. And thank you for trusting me with that. His thumb traced small circles on Alex's wrist, the touch both soothing and electric. For what it's worth, I don't think you're living a half-life. Not from what I've seen tonight. Tonight is not typical for me, Alex admitted with a small laugh. Normally I'd be home by now, probably already asleep with an alarm set for an early morning run. Then I'm honored to be part of your atypical evening, Jake said, his smile warm. And for what it's worth, I think a life needs both, the structure of routine and the thrill of spontaneity. Too much of either, and we lose something essential. The band returned, filling the club with a slow, sensual melody that seemed to perfectly capture the mood between them. Jake's hand remained on Alex's, a point of connection that felt both casual and significant. Dance with me? Jake asked, nodding toward the small area where a few couples were already swaying to the music. Another choice point, another step further from the ordinary evening that had been planned. Alex hesitated only briefly before nodding. Fair warning. I have been told my dancing resembles a newborn giraffe trying to find its legs. Jake's laugh was rich and genuine. I find that hard to believe, but I'm willing to risk my toes to find out. They moved to the dance floor, finding a small space among the other couples. Jake's hand settled at the small of Alex's back, firm but not possessive, guiding them into a simple rhythm that matched the music's languid pace. Their bodies fit together with surprising ease, as if they'd danced this dance before in some other life. See? No giraffe qualities detected, Jake murmured, his breath warm against Alex's ear. You've been hiding your talents. The music wrapped around them, creating a cocoon of sound and sensation. Alex could feel Jake's heartbeat, steady and strong, a counterpoint to the butterflies taking flight in his own chest. There was something almost dreamlike about the moment, the soft lighting, the music, the feeling of being held by someone who, just hours ago, had been a complete stranger. This is crazy, isn't it? Alex said quietly, not really expecting an answer. Meeting like this, feeling like this so quickly. Jake pulled back just enough to meet Alex's gaze. His expression serious despite the smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Maybe, or maybe it's the most sane thing in the world. Recognizing something good when you find it, instead of questioning it to death. As the song drew to a close, they remained in their embrace for a beat longer than necessary, neither quite ready to break the spell. When they finally returned to their table, something had shifted between them, a decision made without words, an understanding reached in the language of touch and glance. They finished their drinks in a comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging looks that said more than words could capture. When Jake finally spoke, his voice had a new quality to it, softer, more vulnerable than it had been all evening. "My apartment is about a 15-minute walk from here," he said, the invitation clear in his tone. "I make an excellent cup of coffee, if you're interested in continuing this conversation somewhere more private." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Alex thought about the comfortable routine waiting at home, the safety of the known. Then thought about Jake's earlier question, about regret, about chances not taken. "I'd like that," Alex said simply. "Though I should warn you, I take my coffee very seriously." Relief and pleasure washed across Jake's face. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They settled their bill and stepped out into the night, which had grown cooler during their time in the club. Without discussion, Jake slipped off his jacket and draped it over Alex's shoulders, the gesture both old-fashioned and genuinely thoughtful. "Thank you," Alex said, pulling it closer and breathing in the subtle scent of Jake's cologne mixed with the lingering notes of cigar smoke. "Though now you're the one who'll be cold." "I run hot," Jake said with a wink. "Another quality you might appreciate knowing about me." The walk to Jake's apartment was filled with a new kind of tension, anticipation mixed with the slight nervousness that comes with crossing a threshold, both literal and figurative. They talked about lighter things, favorite seasons, childhood pets, the best meal they'd ever eaten, but beneath the casual conversation ran a current of awareness, of bodies moving closer to an inevitable connection. Jake's building was a pre-war brownstone on a tree-lined street, the kind of place that spoke of history and character rather than modern convenience. He led the way up 3 flights of stairs, apologizing for the lack of elevator, while Alex secretly appreciated the chance to admire the view from behind. "Home sweet home," Jake said as he unlocked the door, stepping aside to let Alex enter first. "It's nothing fancy, but it suits me." The apartment was a revelation, not at all what Alex had expected based on the confident, polished man he'd spent the evening with. Instead of sleek minimalism, the space was warm and eclectic, filled with books stacked on every surface, vintage furniture that favored comfort over style, and walls covered in photographs that must have been Jake's own work. Plants thrived in the windows, their greenery softening the urban view beyond. "This is beautiful," Alex said honestly, moving further into the room to examine a particularly striking photograph of an elderly woman laughing, her face a map of wrinkles that spoke of a life fully lived. "Did you take all of these?" Jake nodded, closing the door behind them. There was a hint of vulnerability in his expression now, as if showing his home, his true space, was more intimate than any physical act could be. "Most of them. It's how I see the world, I suppose. Moments of connection, of real emotion." Alex moved from photo to photo, taking in the stories they told. Children playing in the spray of a broken fire hydrant, an old man feeding pigeons with the concentration of a chess master, a young couple asleep on a subway train, their heads leaning together in perfect trust. Each image captured something essential about humanity, about the beauty found in ordinary moments. "You have a gift," Alex said finally, turning back to find Jake watching with an intensity that sent warmth spreading through every limb. "For seeing people as they really are." Jake moved closer, the space between them charged with potential energy. "I try," he said simply. "It's the only thing that matters, isn't it? Really seeing each other." They stood there for a moment, the pretense of coffee forgotten as the real reason for coming here hung in the air between them. Jake reached out slowly, giving Alex every chance to step back, to reconsider. Instead, Alex moved forward, closing the distance until they were breathing the same air. "I want to kiss you," Jake said, his voice a low rumble that Alex could feel as much as hear. I've wanted to since I saw you at the bar. What's stopping you? Alex whispered, heart hammering against ribs like a bird seeking freedom. Nothing, as it turned out. Jake's lips were warm and tasted faintly of whiskey and promise. The kiss began gently, a question rather than a demand, but quickly deepened as Alex responded with equal fervor. Jake's hands found their way to Alex's waist, pulling their bodies flush against each other while Alex's fingers tangled in Jake's hair, holding him close as if he might disappear. They moved together toward the couch, unwilling to break contact even for the few steps it took to get there. Jake sat first, pulling Alex down to straddle his lap, their kisses growing more urgent, more hungry with each passing moment. When Jake's lips moved to Alex's neck, finding a particularly sensitive spot just below the ear, the resulting gasp seemed to fill the room. "Is this okay?" Jake asked, his hands pausing at the buttons of Alex's shirt, the same shirt that had been the catalyst for this entire evening when Ash had fallen upon it hours earlier. "More than okay," Alex assured him, helping with the buttons before returning the favor, pushing Jake's shirt off broad shoulders to reveal skin that begged to be touched, to be tasted. What followed was a dance of discovery, learning the geography of each other's bodies, the places that elicited sighs versus moans, the rhythm that built pleasure layer by layer. They moved from couch to bedroom at some point, leaving a trail of discarded clothing in their wake. In Jake's bed, with moonlight streaming through windows they'd been too distracted to cover, they found a connection that transcended the physical, though the physical was undeniably glorious. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled of sweat and satisfaction, they talked in the intimate whispers that seem only possible in the dark. Jake traced patterns on Alex's skin as they shared secrets, fears, hopes that had never been voiced to anyone else. There was a safety in the darkness, in the aftermath of pleasure, that made vulnerability feel like strength rather than weakness. "Stay," Jake murmured as Alex's eyelids grew heavy with approaching sleep. "Not just tonight. Tomorrow. Let's have breakfast, walk around the neighborhood. I want to show you the bakery with the croissants." Alex smiled against Jake's chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. "Are you always this forward on first dates?" "Only when I know something special," Jake replied, pressing a kiss to the top of Alex's head. "And this? You definitely qualify as special." As sleep claimed them both, Alex's last conscious thought was that sometimes the most extraordinary evenings begin with the simplest accidents, like cigar ash falling on a clean white shirt and a man brave enough to brush it away with his lips. Morning brought sunlight and the promised coffee, which was indeed excellent. They moved around each other in Jake's kitchen with a comfort that belied their short acquaintance, as if some part of them recognized each other from before. Over breakfast, they made plans for the day, then the weekend, then tentatively for the following week. Each suggestion a small commitment, a tiny bridge being built between their separate lives. Later, as they walked hand in hand to the famous bakery, Alex thought about how differently this day might have gone if that ash hadn't fallen, if Jake hadn't been so boldly playful in his response, if caution had won over curiosity. It was a reminder that life pivots on such small moments, a text from a friend, a decision to sit at a bar instead of going home, ash falling from a cigar onto a clean white shirt. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked, squeezing Alex's hand gently. "You have the most fascinating expression on your face." Alex smiled, feeling lighter than in months, perhaps years. "I'm thinking about luck, about timing, about how sometimes the universe conspires to put you exactly where you need to be, even when you had other plans." Jake's answering smile was radiant, full of promise and possibility. "In that case, remind me to thank the universe and my cigar for their excellent conspiracy skills." As they continued down the street, steps in perfect sync, Alex silently acknowledged that while tomorrow remained unwritten, today, this moment, was a gift worth seizing with both hands. After all, isn't that what life is ultimately about? Not the careful plans we make, but the unexpected moments that change everything, like cigar ash falling on a shirt, and the extraordinary connection that follows when someone brushes it away with their lips. Total _char_count, 18,837.